of FBI agents. Let's go to someone who knows all about this. Frank Figliuzzi was former assistant director for counterintel at the FBI. Walk us through where this fits in. I mentioned that the president has wide authority to pick his cabinet and team. There's an advice and consent of the Senate. But that type of personnel shift we see, very standard. This reaching down to the agent level, to field offices, and all but admitting that it's for partisan purposes. How extreme is this? And does it concern you about the crime-fighting abilities of the FBI going forward?
Yeah, Ari, this is indeed unprecedented in the history of the FBI. And the one message I hope people hear tonight is that we are now significantly less safe as a nation. When you are peeling away layers of leadership, right down to field office squads and agents and even analysts, you are making America less safe. At any given time in this country, there are multiple terror plots being tracked by the FBI. And interference and intervention is what prevents them from playing out entirely. God help us if one of the offices impacted by this purge at several layers of leadership and even some of their best agents being walked out or told to go home, there's a terror plot playing out. That's not a political thing. That's a safety thing. The other thing that's happening is any semblance of diversity and inclusion is literally being wiped off the map. The New York Times put out a photo today of the walls of Quantico, the FBI Academy, where they're painting over the FBI's core values to include integrity, adherence to the Constitution, and diversity. A less diverse FBI is a less effective FBI. Try doing surveillance on the street in the inner city with two white guys. Try working undercover in a Middle Eastern terror organization with a white guy. It doesn't work that way. So we're becoming less and less safe very quickly.
Understood. I mentioned that Kash Patel disclaimed, said he opposed this, what the Times and the AP and other outlets are reporting. And I mentioned that, Frank, because as you know, and I think our viewers know, there are a lot of efforts underway to minimize and normalize everything, or to say that everything is a sort of an outburst, a quote unquote emotional, exaggerated response to what Donald Trump is doing. And that's even one of the rhetorical devices. And yet, I think it matters tonight that what we just reported and what you said could make America less safe is something that Donald Trump's FBI nominee felt the need under oath to say, no, he wouldn't do that. He's against that. And it's literally what now today is being reported. That's the introduction for a short bit of sound from Patel under oath. Take a look.
If you can't commit that those FBI agents will be protected from political retribution, we can't accept you as FBI director.
All FBI employees will be protected against political retribution.
They deserve.
Frank?
Look, if anybody looks at what's happening in reality and what Kash Patel testified to before Congress, there's only one conclusion. He was being less than truthful. He was lying. And it is what we've seen other nominees do, back away from all of their prior statements and conduct and pretend to be somebody they're not, even while it's happening in real life. What the Senate should do is call him back to the Hill and say, please explain what's going on and how you don't possibly understand what's going on in the agency you're going to try to lead.
What should Americans do with this information? There's what Donald Trump promotes, and I think folks who follow the news have a sense of that. Dr. Phil is on the ride along. There's big, bold statements. There's executive orders which legally disintegrate in a matter of days because they weren't written according to the Constitution. But he wanted the headlines. There's all of that. And then there's this, what could be a pattern, according to the AP reporting, that into the Friday late hours, you get these other agenda items which affect a lot of things. They might affect the safety of Washington and Miami and other field offices, and they're not being promoted. They're almost being hidden. What are we to make of that, and what should people do?
So first order of business, contact your member of Congress, your member of the Senate, particularly if they serve on committees that are handling nominees, and particularly if it's judiciary with the FBI, and say, you feel less safe because of what's happening here. Secondly, Inevitably, what I'm hearing is there will be funding requests to help these agents and employees, many of whom, by the way, are not eligible for retirement. They have kids to feed, tuition to pay for college kids, and they're going to be kicked out the door with nothing. And they're going to need to fight this in court. By the way, most of this is highly illegal. Summary dismissals without gross misconduct are illegal, but it could take a year or two for these to work their way through the courts. They're going to need help with legal funding.
And since you said it, let me let you explain that. So this could be an unlawful firing. It's not that it's some new crime, but that if they break the statute and the protections, it's unlawful. And yet one of the problems we're seeing, and testing or pushing is what exposes this, you're reminding folks that that has to then be pursued, in the federal court process, and can take a long time for an agent or anyone to get any remedy for that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, think back to Pete Strzok or Andy McCabe at the highest levels of the FBI being terminated, all eventually getting their back pay, getting their pensions back. But that took a very long time. And those guys were without income for a very long time.
Breaking news, more than 20 heads of FBI field offices have been ordered to retire or be fired today, including the leaders of the Bureau's field offices in Miami and Washington, D.C. NBC News is reporting this, but beyond just DOJ leadership, Donald Trump's Justice Department started purging rank-and-file prosecutors who brought violent January 6 rioters to justice. Their termination letter quoted Trump's comments that the cases represented, quote, a grave national injustice, end quote. At least 174 of the nearly 1,600 rioters whose cases or sentences Trump terminated had been charged with assaulting police with dangerous weapons. The acting Deputy Attorney General, Emil Bovee, who served as Trump's personal criminal defense attorney, sent a memo to Justice Department leaders ordering the purge of January 6 prosecutors, revealing that the former president, Biden, gave these prosecutors permanent status following Trump's election. In his memo, Bovee called their employment subversive for federal prosecutors. The FBI Agents Association disagreed, denouncing the purge as outrageous, writing, quote, if true, these outrageous actions by acting officials are fundamentally at odds with the law enforcement objectives outlined by President Trump and his support for FBI agents. Dismissing potentially hundreds of agents would severely weaken the Bureau's ability to protect the country from national security and criminal threats, and will ultimately risk setting up the Bureau and its new leadership for failure, end quote. Now, Trump's FBI pick, Kash Patel, gave this shocking answer yesterday in his Senate confirmation hearings. He thinks the FBI ultimately reports to Trump.
Who does the director of the FBI work for, Mr. Patel?
Senator, thank you for that question. The immediate report for the director of the FBI is into the Office of the Deputy Attorney General. Then that report is taken into the Office of the Attorney General and ultimately the White House and the chain of command there.
So the FBI works for the White House?
No, the FBI is a member of the Department of Justice and has been the longstanding application.
And who does the Department of Justice work for?
They're in the executive branch, as all members do at the White House.
Attorney General Bondi gave a different answer when I asked her the same question, that they work for the Constitution and the American people.
Until literally I just did that intro, you got new information on this FBI situation.
Yeah, there's a memo that was sent out by the acting director of the FBI. This is just a career person who really doesn't have much power. But essentially, the Justice Department, Emil Bovee, the acting deputy attorney general, has asked for a list of every single FBI agent in the country who worked on a January 6th prosecution. And the acting head of the FBI sent this, across the workforce, but said that he understood this would mean thousands of FBI personnel who've worked on these
because it was the largest investigation
in American history.
So these FBI agents are not self-assigning, just in the way that you and I as journalists are not self-assigning,
yes.
right?
Yes.
We get assignments from other people. It's not really on an FBI agent to say, not taking that case.
And that's what's so different here and frankly surprising. This isn't some effort, to go after Jack Smith, not that, some would argue that's not justified, but this is thousands of agents who were simply doing their jobs and questioning all of the prosecutions related to January 6th, every single one of them. And so there will be a review of all of those thousands of FBI agents,
Right.
and whether they too should face some sort of action as these people that were ousted tonight, the much more senior people. So it's a much broader approach than I expected. I'll be honest about that.
Joyce, let's talk about the distinction, whether it's FBI agents or it's prosecutors. Whether you agree with it or not, high-level people sometimes get asked to resign and change over with the new administration. Some would argue, and I'm one of them, that really shouldn't happen, that the civil service is the civil service and that should be it. But sometimes political appointees get asked to move on when there's a new president. This is not what we're talking about here, Joyce. I use the word purge because it's going to ranks and levels that are much lower than the most senior decision makers, either in the Department of Justice or the FBI.
Yeah, purge is exactly the right word for what this is. You expect to see political appointees. I was a political appointee in the Obama administration. You expect to see us leave at the end of the administration. What we're talking about now is career employees, and they can only be removed whether they're...
Folks, what we're seeing here is a big conflict, and the FBI is getting revenge, or the people are getting revenge. This is my view, that somebody internally leaked this info, and that's one of the reasons it broke early enough on this Friday, on this weekend times, you know, I mean, the end of the week, to actually impact the news cycle. What Trump did last week with the inspectors general was fire them. Not even really Friday. It kind of broke, after midnight, very early Saturday morning. You saw it break on the news at like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., that people were starting to react to it. And that helped dull the effect of the news cycle. He was able to hide that purge. This time, though, someone went out ahead and said, not only is Trump trying to purge the FBI, and not only is it clearly him trying to install the sort of folks that'll be willing to take revenge tours, that's what he wants to see, but that he's trying to hide it in the middle of the night so you can't react to it. And that didn't work this time. If there was any doubt in your mind about Trump's intent, this should remove all doubt. That Trump and Patel, if Patel gets confirmed, and that's not 100%, but whoever eventually gets confirmed for his FBI pick, they will 100% be using it to go after political enemies, past, present, and future. And clearly, the people being removed, either they said they won't go along with it, or it's perceived that they won't go along with it, and so Trump is shunting them aside, throwing them out of the building, and putting in Trump cronies, or people that he feels will be cronies for him. And that's where we're at. Luckily, this story broke a little bit earlier, so we could cover it. That's something Donald did not want.